he's a phantom. Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine designed to view a world unseen. He's gonna catch 'em all 'cause he's Danny Phantom. When it didn't quite work, his folks, they just quit. But then Danny took a look inside of it. There was a great thing to
Danny Phantom is one of Nickelodeon's most successful shows. It's a show that many of you have already watched when you were children. It's a show that I watched when I was a child. It's a show filled with great writing, great characters, and amazing villains. But what if the show's writing isn't as good as we believe it is? Now, I'm not talking about nostalgia. Usually nostalgia makes the writing appear better to us when we were children than it actually is. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is a more specific issue. An issue that can actually be identified. And that issue is the recent graphic novel, A Glitch in Time. The graphic novel that apparently ruined one of the greatest villains that Nickelodeon has ever seen. Danny Phantom, A Glitch in Time. This graphic novel came out recently, and a lot of people on Reddit and other platforms seem to think that it contradicts Dark Danny, the one depicted in the Ultimate Enemy episode. Is that true? Well, let's explore it a little bit. So before getting into this, let's just go over a couple of things. So, for the people who are coming from Instagram, you guys already know who I am. I'm Chroma Magic's Kevin, right? And on here, I'm going to be doing video essays, analysis type videos, maybe reviews. Who knows what I'll do, right? But video essays are 100% going to be one of the main points of this channel. Just vocalizing them for you guys so it's easier for you guys to digest them, right? Alongside that, just want to, let you all know, the people who are coming from Instagram, that I am not going to be stopping Instagram posting. I'm not going to be quitting the community on there. I'm still going to be on there. It's just that I'm going to be expanding a bit, I guess you could say. And so this is just one part of that expansion. So let's go over now, the graphic novel. So a lot of people seem to think that the interpretation of Dark Danny in the graphic novel contradicts the interpretation of him in the Ultimate Enemy. However, it's not really a contradiction in the sense that it's a bad thing. It's more of a recontextualization with added nuance. All this graphic novel does is recontextualize behavior in the Ultimate Enemy. Specifically explain at the core of this wasn't just pure evil, but rather tragedy and grief. Something that was already set up and hinted at in the Ultimate Enemy of his backstory. In the Ultimate Enemy, it's revealed that Danny's future self lost his entire family in the explosion. Everyone and everything he loved died at his hands because the test that he cheated on led to them going to that diner to confront or to talk to his teacher, and then they all died in the explosion at the diner. That guilt, that suffering, that grief, alongside being completely alone now, leads to him wanting to rip out his human self, those human emotions. No more human emotions, as Vlad says.
Human emotions.
And that works. His human self is ripped, or more specifically, his ghost self is ripped out of his human self, and that human self dies by the ghost self, or the ghost self murders the human self completely. On a surface level, ripping out and killing his humanity seems to be the reason why he acts so inhumane in the Ultimate Enemy. However, the graphic novel recontextualizes this a bit and explains that it's a little bit deeper than just that. In the Ultimate Enemy, Dark Danny constantly made remarks regarding how he wasn't human.
If I had an ounce of humanity left in me, this would be a very touching little reunion. But of course I surrendered my human half a long time ago.
Throughout most of the graphic novel, he acts the exact same way, making remarks about how he doesn't feel anything and how he has no ounce of humanity left in him. It's only at the end, after he loses the present Danny, that he cracks, and one can see that what he's been saying this entire time isn't true at all. That's the thing. Dark Danny doesn't want to feel anything. He wants to be completely inhumane. He does not want a single ounce of humanity in him. Hence why he acted the way he did in the Ultimate Enemy, and acts the same way he does in most of the graphic novel. He killed his human self so he could dissociate from his humanity, and he constantly tells himself that he can't feel anything in every situation where he should feel something, as if this somehow makes it completely true. But it doesn't, and that's the point of both the added lore that explains how his ghost half is just a manifestation of his human emotions, and him cracking at the end of the graphic novel. As Sam tells Danny in the graphic novel, quote, "I think it's saying that ghosts aren't separate entities, they're manifestations of real human emotions." End quote. And as shown by Vlad's fight with Dark Danny, or explicitly stated in that fight, this does not exclude Dark Danny. Quote, "You're also my phantom, which means you're full of emotion, full of fear. I fear nothing. Why amass all this power? For control. Why control others? So no one else leaves." End quote. And Dark Danny's breakdown at the end of the graphic novel confirms Vlad's assessment of him to be true. Quote, "All I do is lose. I lost this battle, my timeline, my family. Why did I lose everything and you didn't? No, I'm not going back. I don't want to be alone again." Just like Vlad said, Dark Danny's desire for control derived from the fact that he had lost everything and everyone in his entire life, that he had been alone in that ghost cage for years upon years upon years. And at this point, all he can really do is control everyone else so that he'll never be alone again, so that no one else leaves. But of course, Dark Danny can't admit that to himself. That's a very human desire, a very human emotion, that pain, that grief, right? So much grief that he's quite literally crying in these panels over the loss of his family, who he had lost so many years ago. The grief is real, the pain is real, the loss is still there deep inside of him. Those human emotions, pain and anger and guilt and loneliness and grief, just manifesting this ghostly half. But at the same time, he can't admit, he can accept that ghostly half, he can't accept that nature of his ghost half. To him, that ghost half represents the dissociation from his humanity, inhumanity, his inhumane nature now, the one that he's now gained from stripping away his human self. But the reality is that's not that at all. That ghost nature derives from his human emotions, but he can't accept that. He just can't. To accept the truth behind his ghostly nature, he would have to accept the pain and the grief and the loss that he still feels deep inside. The humanity that still resides inside of him that makes him feel these kind of things. He would have to accept that he still feels pain over the loss of his parents, the loss of his friends. And he just can't do that. He can't accept that. The entire point of his backstory was to strip away that humanity, was to run away from those emotions, was to run away from the pain, the grief. Okay, that was the point. That was the point. What was all this for if he just accepts it again? If he just accepts that none of that, that those emotions are still there, that humanity is still there, that he can still feel those things, that he does still feel those things. What's the point then? What was the point of doing all that? There was no point. All this running away from his human emotions, from the grief, right? All would have been for nothing. He can't do that. He can't accept that. He wants to run away. He needs to run away. He just can't bring himself to fully accept the fact that he's still human, that some part of him's still human, and that part of him can still feel the grief that he wants to run away from, the grief that he killed his human self so that he can run away from. That's why he repeatedly says that he's not human anymore. That's why in situations like when he sees Sam and Tucker again, or when he sees his family again, he tells them that he had given up his human half a long time ago, therefore he cannot feel anything. Therefore, this reunion is not touching at all to him. But he's not just telling them that. He's telling himself that. He's trying so hard to convince himself again and again and again that his human self is gone, that those human emotions are gone, that his grief and his pain are gone, and therefore he cannot feel a single thing from anyone or anything. He cannot feel any loss, any pain, anything. No grief, no guilt, nothing. No fear, no loneliness. He explicitly says to Vlad in that fight that he fears nothing. It's a picture-perfect representation of his denial, of his very feelings, of his very emotions that are at the core of his ghost self, the core of his ghost nature. To face his humanity, to face his human emotions that are stored deep within him, he would also have to inherently face his grief and pain, because to be human is to also experience grief and pain when you lose someone so dear to you, so close to you. Especially in the case of Danny, who loses his entire family and his friends all in one explosion that was his fault, or at least he believes it's his fault, because it was his test that led to the death of everyone he ever loved. And as Vlad said in the Ultimate Enemy episode, quote,
"All you wanted was to make the hurt go
end
away."
quote. Danny's grief and pain are inherently a part of those human emotions. The entire reason why he stripped away his humanity, the entire reason why he became this, was because he wanted to make the pain go away. He wanted those feelings of grief go away. So to face those human emotions, to accept them as a part of him, to accept them as a part of his nature, as the core of his ghost self, would mean having to return to that state where he has to experience those emotions all over again, where he has to accept those emotions all over again, the pain and grief that he had tried so hard to run away from, the pain and grief that he had tried so hard to make go away, and that is something he refuses to do no matter what. Dark Danny's journey is all about escapism, running away from the grief and pain that tormented him, even if it means having to strip away every ounce of humanity from him to do so. Even if it means having to lie to himself again and again about how he's inhumane, how his humanity is gone, how he stripped away his human self, how his human self is gone, how he feels nothing, even if he has to lie to himself every single time he meets someone from his past. He will do it if he means believing this lie, believing that his grief and pain are gone, pushing away that grief and pain with this delusion of his that he has no ounce of humanity left in him, hoping that each time he lies to himself, an actual piece of the humanity will be erased, killed off. That's not how it works. As shown by the end of the graphic novel, it doesn't work. Those human emotions still exist. That grief still exists. Just because he tries his hardest to act as if they don't exist, doesn't mean they don't truly exist. And so after he once again loses, once again fails, a testament to his entire life and to the foundation of his tragedy where he failed to save his family, those human emotions overwhelm him. The ones that have been repressed all this time finally overwhelm him, finally break loose. And he cracks. Even though he doesn't want to feel the grief, even though he wants to run away from the grief, he can't run away from it. Because the only way to deal with grief, the only way to heal from grief is to face it and work through it, not to try to run away from it, as it will always catch up to you. Maybe not today, but one day it will, because it never truly went away in the first place. What this graphic novel did was heavily recontextualize and expand the foundation that was already there, that being the Ultimate Enemy backstory and Dark Danny's remarks in the Ultimate Enemy episode, in a logical manner. That interpretation of the character in the story, the foundation behind it, the setup, the hints are already established in the episode itself. All this does, all the story does, is expand on that, add more context to it, add more depth and nuance to it. That's all it does, through both the lore and the story that it tells of Dark Danny and present Danny. So, going back to the title of the video, let's answer the title. Is this Danny Phantom's greatest failure? And the answer is no, not at all. This is actually one of Danny Phantom's greatest successes, especially after the failure that was season 3 of the show. This is a great step in the right direction of actual good writing, and I hope that it continues to go down this direction for a long, long time. But really quick, before I end the video, I have to plug in my Instagram for everyone coming in from YouTube. If you guys want, you guys can go to my Instagram. There I have a bunch of just write-ups and just write-up form, right? Just a bunch of analysis in general, just in write-up form where you guys can read. If you guys want to hear my voice, you guys can just read those. And there I update and talk about stuff, talk about media, and go through all that. So if you guys want to go over there and see all that, go do it. I mean, it's your choice. But yeah.